Countries across the world are ditching the US dollar. Tonight, we want to tell you about how it's playing out in West Asia. Iraq has become the latest country to dump the US dollar. Iraqis are now banned from dealing in the greenback. The announcement was made last week. Iraq's Interior Ministry issued a statement. It was a message for all citizens of Iraq. Listen to this. The dinar is the national currency in Iraq. Your commitment to transact in it instead of foreign currencies boosts the country's sovereignty and economy. So currency has now become a matter of nationalism. But why were Iraqis relying on the dollar in the first place? Well, this is a trend that dates back to the 1990s. It began with the Gulf War in 1991. It was followed by UN sanctions. And then, more than a decade later, the US invaded Iraq. All of this damaged the Iraqi currency, the dinar. It lost value with each conflict and finally collapsed when the Americans invaded some 20 years back. Just to give you an idea, $1 was worth 4,000 Iraqi dinars. So the war killed the Iraqi currency. After the war, the US established a stranglehold on the country, and the US dollar became the de facto currency of Iraq. America also helped establish the central bank of Iraq. But this is a cash-dependent economy. According to the World Bank, just 26% of Iraqi companies use the formal banking system, only 26%, about a quarter of them, and 98% of Iraq's companies pay their employees in cash. And since Iraqi dinar lacks value, the US dollar is used to make those payments.
In 2007, 25 banks, they had to be bailed out, including Washington Mutual, the single largest bank failure in history, total of $526 billion, and that was over 12 months. In the last 5 weeks, we have had 3 U.S. banks fail, and we're already over the 2007 total by $6 billion.
It's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be.
I want people to go read Executive Order 14067. Executive Order 14067, signed by Uncle Joe, the 8th of March of 2022, and it went into effect 13 December 2022.
COVID makes it accelerates the process of digitalization and automatization. It legitimizes the deployment of mass surveillance, and it makes surveillance go under your skin.
The nature of this CBDC, what is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that.
Right.
But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. And it was around this large and would be implanted under your skin.
CBDC. If that happens, we're done.
The old systems of trust and of ownership will have to adapt radically.
China's taken over, and China, I heard a couple of people say, well, the dollar will never lose the dollar standard. Are they kidding?
Now the Brics nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have announced plans to develop a new currency.
Known as emerging economies, but of course, as we know, that's really grown in significance, and especially when we consider what the world is facing at this point in time. So when we look at the agenda, the official agenda, there's a few top-line details that are going to be discussed this year, including delivering a mutually accelerated growth, sustainable development, and inclusive multilateralism. There's also some points about how Brics, this grouping of nations, can create synergies between that of the G20. And of course, as we know, China, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa encompass a significant proportion of the future growth of the global economy. And so a lot of discussion is going to be had on how they can move forward in what they're calling a multipolar world. And as you mentioned earlier, there is potentially going to be discussions about a currency derived specifically for these Brics nations. And especially when we think about the world as globally moving away from the dollar, we're seeing potentially discussions around whether or not Brics can create a currency pegged to specific minerals, things like gold. And so that will be among the things that are discussed this week. But here in Cape Town, a number of foreign ministers, as you mentioned, the 5 from the Brics nations, but then also a number of foreign ministers from nations from what they're calling the Friends of the BRICS. So that includes foreign minister from Argentina, from Indonesia, from Egypt, and from the UAE and Saudi. And so a lot of these other nations have been talking about whether or not it is time for them to be a part of it. And we'll see whether or not these 5 BRICS nations actually accept